Hello and welcome to another video and podcast on fantasyfootballscout.co.uk. It's Tuesday, which means you know it's time for another round of General's Orders. So I am, of course, joined as ever by the FPL General, who has had a much better game week this time around than last time. Like any seasoned General, he doesn't know when he's beat. He's always got a trick up his sleeve, and that's what's happened in Game Week 3, isn't it, Mark? How are you doing?
Yeah, we're hoping, we don't win every battle, but we hope we're going to win the war in the end by the time we get to Game Week 38. So Game Week 2 was a nightmare. So thankfully Game Week 3 was much better. And I'm certainly a lot chirpier and a lot happier. And I'm jumping out of bed with a bit more gusto this week.
Very good. That's early indication of some of the things that went well for you in Game Week 3. And it definitely feels like there's a little bit more, I guess, positivity just kind of in the surrounding FPL community, because when you've saved up that free transfer and you've used it to freshen things up, I haven't seen too many people find that their 2 free transfers has landed them in a bit of a hole. It seems to have helped freshen everybody's teams up, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's always, I always find it quite useful when you have the 2 frees. I arrived at Game Week 3 with the 2 frees and lots of issues, Gabriel issues, Luke Shaw injuries, Joe Pedro rotation concerns. So I was quite happy and, ended up using both of them, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Absolutely. Well, before we get into how your team specifically got in Game Week 3, just a quick reminder to people that, of course, it's never, ever too late to sign up for Fantasy Football Scout membership. You can still save up to 30% on those preseason prices. I'll let you know when you can't, because it's continually being renewed, because it's a good price for people and it's proven very popular. So make sure you sign up. Some of the things we'll talk about in this particular video will be drawn from that. And so if you want more detail, then you can, of course, head to the website, sign up for the package that is right for you as well. So don't forget to get yourself sorted for Game Week 4, because it's always going to be helpful before a deadline, that's for sure. But yeah, let's have a look at how the General got on in Game Week 3. And I jokingly said to him before he came on that actually I think you are the first person I've done content with this week who actually got more points than me. I thought I'd had a good week, and then I looked at your team. As you say, you picked it with some gusto, 72 points.
Yeah, I mean, for the audio listeners, I'll just run through it and then I'll talk about how lucky I got with the Gusto points. So Johnson in goal, Estupinan, Gusto, and Chilwell. Midfield 4, the double up, Saka, Martinelli, Bruno, and Rashford. So Patience was rewarded with 3 out of those 4. Haaland captain, Nico Jackson, and Watkins up front. So going into the game week, had the 2 free transfers. The problems I mentioned earlier. So I felt like Luke Shaw was the biggest issue to deal with because it was a long-term injury. And I didn't want to rely on João Pedro after De Zerbi said on Friday that Ferguson was going to start. So at that point, I decided, right, Pedro's going to go. I'll go to Nico Jackson. And to do so, I needed to get a very cheap defender. I think 4.4 million or less. So I said, look, I'll just get Gusto. I'll stick him on the bench. I'll start Gabriel because I did think Gabriel would come back in. I've said that every week so far, so I'm just not going to ever say that again now. I think Gabriel's is finally dead as an FPL asset. Gusto, basically, there was a couple of leaks came through on Friday before the deadline. Sterling was going to play, Jackson was going to play, and I was waiting for a Gusto leak. And if it came through, I was going to make a last-minute switch. I was going to start Gusto and bench Gabriel. Didn't come through, so I said, right, I'll just leave Gabriel in because I think he's going to play. Wasn't 100% sure on Gusto because it's early days in his Chelsea career. If there's a change of formation, maybe he doesn't start. And then it was a full 24 hours, really, of sweating over the points on the bench from the Friday night fixture. I was out and about shopping on Saturday with my wife and my little boy, and we were doing some house shopping, we're trying to get some photo frames to put up some photos in the living room, and all I could think about was Gabriel and Gusto. I was trying to be present, but I was just keeping an eye on not even on the score of the Arsenal game. I didn't even care about the score. I just wanted to see what the substitutions were. And, it took right until the end, until Gabriel Jesus came on, that I could finally celebrate. So it was a difficult Saturday waiting for the Gusto points, but thankfully in the end it came good. And I think we all need a bit of luck from time to time in FPL, and I'm certainly recognizing that I was lucky because it might have even been a mistake, on my part not starting Gusto anyway. So thankfully that fixed itself.
Well, I have to say, I think the biggest question that you probably need to face now is those picture frames you bought. Who's going in it? Mikel Arteta, Gabriel, or Gusto? Or all 3 in some sort of Photoshop composite image?
Yeah, do you know what? We're going to put 3 photos on each side of the television. So maybe on one side it'll just be Arteta, Gabriel, and Gusto, just to remember that Saturday.
I love that. I mean, the thing that's so great about FPL, of course, is that so many of these moments we do actually experience them in places that you perhaps least expect. I mean, of course, Mark Sutherland's, quite famously talks about his garden centre games. You now have your which shot was it? It was like a Wilkinson's or something, or I suppose
We're in the range.
Oh, the range. Oh, there we are. Well, you had the range of emotions that day, you have to say. So, yeah. Any of the staff in the shop give you a strange look? Would a member of staff please come to aisle 3 where there's a man who seems to be being too happy to be in the range?
Yeah, it was one of those security to aisle 4, please. There's something's not right down there.
Yeah, clean up an aisle 4. Well, it's good to see you've had a good game week, because of course last week you were sort of rather sheepishly when I asked you over WhatsApp what your overall rank was, so I could update the little little screens I've got here, and it was 3.7 million. But in just one game week, you've gone up to 652k, which I mean that's just absolutely destroyed that OR. I mean. And that's the message I'm saying to a lot of people this week, because my rank's also quite good, but it wasn't amazing the week before. It was just kind of okay. You can go from okay to great, or you can go from awful to back on track, like at the drop of a hat in FPL, can't you?
Yeah, and I'm just like any other manager. Even though I'm a content creator and I've been playing for a long time, I still fall into the same trap every season, early season. If I don't start well, I start getting a bit down about rank, and I start maybe overthinking things a little bit, and it's maybe harder to be patient when your rank isn't looking very nice early doors. But this week just reminded me, a 3 million green arrow in one game week is possible. So I mean, what's possible over 3 or 4 game weeks? And ranks mean very little. It's 72 points. Obviously, it was a big score for the game week, but it's not a mega FPL score. It's not a 100-point game week. And it just shows you all it takes is 1 week to climb those rankings, and more importantly, the mini league positions as well. So again, just the message is always for me: patience, patience, patience. And that's what I was patient with Bruno, with Rashford, with the Arsenal guys. They all blanked in game week 2, but I kept the faith game week 3. And again, had other issues to deal with. I always try and focus on the weakest links. Got rid of Shaw, got rid of Pedro, 2 problems. Brought in a good pick in Jackson, and then Gusto just was a little bonus. So yeah, again, just patience all the way.
And I think actually what's the most encouraging thing here, to be honest, is that it's very affirming and very sort of validating a lot of the things that we talked about last week. And first things first, I have to say, we absolutely loved reading some of the comments we had on last week's episode. There was a lot of people who got in touch to say, what some of the stuff you discussed in terms of how to bounce back from negative experiences either in your life or in FPL, and processing that sort of emotion on maybe perhaps even a regular basis as an FPL manager. A lot of people said that they found that really helpful for both FPL and their real life. So thank you for getting in touch. That was really humbling and nice to see. And I suppose the fact that you've gone and got 72 points this week after you've kind of put that game plan into action, I mean, that's just about as great as it comes. Not only have you had a good game week for reasons that, I mean, there was, as you say, some luck in there, but you've also had a good game week because you stuck to your path, and you stuck to what you know about yourself, what you know about your decision making, especially when it's under duress from having a bad time. All of those things, you did what you knew would work, and you got the results basically instantly. That must feel good.
Yeah, and I went back to I was very flustered, like a lot of people last week, in terms of transfers, especially if you had 2 frees. There was a lot of different routes to go. Foden was tempting. There was Mbumo was an option. There was so many options. Manchester City defenders were on my mind, and I was very close to, I think the early part of the week, I was looking at a -4. When right after the bad game week, I was looking at a -4 possibly for 3 transfers, and I felt very flustered on Friday, even with 3 or 4 hours to go to the deadline. I still didn't know what I was going to do, and I just went back to that document that I put together every preseason, and it just calmed me down. It was like avoid the points hits wherever possible. Don't panic after a bad game week; they're part of the game. And just reading through a few bullet points, brought me back to earth. Avoided the -4. Stayed patient with the good players from the good teams with the good fixtures, and it worked out nicely. So hopefully the same set of troops don't go out and get another 25-point game week in game week 4.
But I suppose even if they do, I mean, again, it's just the fact that you've had confirmation that patient approach does yield results. So it's useful to have that kind of experience in the early part of the campaign, because it just helps remind you of those things. As you said, always good to refer back to those little documents. And if anyone else who's been watching the General's Orders videos this year, if you were in the same place as Mark last week, a little bit sort of flustered, as he said, to do with those transfers, and if anything we sort of talked through on this video was helpful, then do get in touch, let us know. It's always nice to know that we are able to help you guys. That's something we find very rewarding, being able to sort of help people with the little struggles they've got with their FPL team. So So yeah, good week for Mark. I'm not going to dwell too much on my team because I have actually got a team reveal video that is coming out on Wednesday, and people are probably sick to death of hearing about me being 19k. I keep saying I'm trying not to brag, so hopefully this comes across just as humble as possible. I'm happy with where I am right now. It's all about Aston Villa. Cash, Diaby doing it for me. Players I've had since the start of the season. They've come off. I'm quite happy with it. But I mean, the thing is anything can happen from this point. I'm not going to rest on my laurels. I've still got decisions to make. And rather than take up your time, that's you, Mark, and everybody else listening, talking through what I'm going to do for game week 4. I think I'm just going to leave that for my team review video so that people go and watch that and can get a break from me being gloating, because I'm pretty sure so far I think I've been above you every game week so far, Mark, and I feel really bad about that. We don't want to ruin the USP of the video, right?
Yeah, I'm already trying to calculate in my head how many points ahead you are, because that's one of my. I've got a list of targets for the season, but I've just added another one.
There we go.
Catch David.
I've put a target on the back of my head for sure. I mean,
Yes.
I don't actually know what the difference is at this point, but going into I did deadline stream with Sam on Friday, and we were about 60k places apart, but only 1 point apart from each other. So I'm gonna just hazard a guess that we're not that far apart from each other. So, it's just a constant reminder to people that it's very crazy at the start of the season. You won't know this yet because they haven't gone live with it. But Harry and Andy, who both do Burning Questions, get this. Right now, they're on exactly the same rank. They have the exact same number, 224075. Absolutely nuts. And actually, they didn't even discover it until I started putting the slides together for the video. So, I mean, you just get wackadoodle things happening with rank at this stage of the season, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's yeah, I'm just thinking about how I'm going to catch you, but I really need those Aston Villa boys to calm down, Cash and Diaby, because I mean, you've had both of them since game week 1.
I've had both. Yeah, I've had a Villa defender placeholder since the game launched. It was Digne, and then became Cash. You can thank Neil Rigg for that one. And then Diaby, I think I had him for about 2 weeks after launch. Whenever he started going big guns in pre-season, basically. So he's been there a while. Yeah,
2 very shrewd picks, and I think people like me who don't have Cash or Diaby, we're probably not going to go there either, because we're looking elsewhere. I'm looking at Maddison, I'm looking at Foden, I'm looking at City defenders. So you could be benefiting from those guys for a little bit longer while other people don't go there.
Conversely, I'm also a little bit worried actually about Cash for the Liverpool game. So at the moment, I won't spoil too much about the team reveal video. I am looking at benching him for that particular game. As you say, then neither of them are must-owns really. I think I'm not anticipating a repeat of the most recent game week anytime soon. So I do have some big decisions to make elsewhere in the team. And to be honest, going into Sunday, I wasn't actually feeling all that happy. I was about 540k because I'd held on to Pedro in the hope that he'd had his rest. We sort of talked about that last week about maybe he's going to come back in. Can we treat Brighton like the new city with, he's had his rest, so he come back in, blah, blah, blah. Got just the 1 point, and that blocked the Anderson points on the bench. In the end, it was Foden that did that. So I was a bit okay. And so then I don't want to necessarily say it was all fluke, because I think they're good players, but I certainly don't want to be relying on the Aston Villa guys for my big points and my, the bedrock on my team. So I think it maybe is masking a few issues I've got to solve potentially. But this week it's not that tricky. I got 2 free transfers still because I only did the one last time, and there's some obvious candidates for me. But as I said, we'll save that for a different piece of content. Let's focus in on the orders this week, of which we have 3, as we always do. And the first of those, Mark already knows what it is, but he doesn't know what the picture is. I've chosen a picture of Roy Hodgson looking at his watch, and very much conscious of the time of day and what day it is. So, FPL General, please take us away with order number 1 for Game Week 4.
Yeah, order number 1, to be fair, I could probably throw this in every week, but I just want to re-emphasize it after the last couple of game weeks. It's wait until Friday to make your transfers. If you haven't made a move yet, if you're watching us during the week, just hold off until Friday. Obviously, there's certain caveats. If you've got 0.0 in the bank and you really want to do something, then maybe it's okay. But I think the first few weeks have really, this season, been quite punishing for people who've gone early. We've had all the stuff with the Game Week 1 deadline with the late team news. We've had, injuries to other players, other teams. The Maddison one last week looked to me and to everyone else that Maddison wasn't going to play in Game Week 3. And then if you wait till Friday, you get the pressers comments from Postecoglou. It says he's okay and he's going to be involved. So, and obviously, of course, he was always going to score then after a lot of people sold him. That's just typical FPL. So, yeah, we've had a lot of stuff. A lot of injuries happening during the week, and we're getting news about them on Fridays in Friday's pressers. So, yeah, for me, it's always about being patient, making your moves on Fridays. And this week as well, we've got EFL Cup games, 12 Premier League teams in action, Tuesday and Wednesday. So, yes, there'll be a lot of rotation, but all it takes is one injury to change your FPL plans for Game Week 4. And the other thing as well, just on Maddison, if you were someone who sold Maddison, I think we're going to talk about him later, so I'll come back to him. But yeah, patience, wait till Friday. Champions League is going to kick in very soon after the international break, Europa League, Conference League. I'm always a manager who waits until Friday if I can. I've taken a lot of price drops. I've got a Gabriel who's already 4.8. Probably not going to sell him this week. I'll be probably selling him for about 4.5 or even 4.4 at this rate whenever I get a chance to do so. But it doesn't bother me. If I've got a strong starting 11, if there's a couple of price drops happening, I'm not going to let it concern me. That I'm possibly looking at a Maddison this week, but I can afford to do it on Friday rather than Tuesday or Wednesday. So yeah, patience again.
And I think the EFL Cup is maybe going to catch a few people out, actually, because you've obviously mentioned it there, because it doesn't have the same glamour as the Champions League. And to be honest, I'd completely forgotten about it until I sort of sat down on Monday morning and sort of planned my week in terms of what's on and when. Oh yeah, the EFL Cup is around, and as you say, 12 teams involved in that. They have actually regionalised it at this stage of the tournament, which is useful in terms of we're not going to have anybody going. We're not going to have like Bournemouth going to visit Carlisle, not yet anyway. But in terms of the teams that are involved. We've got Wolves are hosting Blackpool. We've got Bournemouth away at Swansea. We've got Spurs and Fulham facing each other. So maybe not that much rotation there because it's not like they're playing a lower league team. They're facing each other. Crystal Palace are, of course, coming to the mighty Plymouth Argyle, so that's no easy fixture these days. For example, they're the Tuesday night games. Then on Wednesday we've got Forest hosting Burnley. So again, those two teams might fancy a cut run this year. So maybe we see your Awonyis and your first choice Burnley players involved in that game. Sheffield United hosting Lincoln, Everton away at Doncaster, and Chelsea are hosting AFC Wimbledon. So fingers crossed, Chelsea don't play a big team there. But certainly it's worth remembering that these games are happening, and for some of these teams, maybe an EFL Cup run is what they might be focusing on with their team selection this year, for example. So, yeah, worth keeping an eye on that. And I suppose the other thing on price changes, I haven't really been all that stressed about price changes, I don't think, for about 2 years, if I'm honest, because the game seems to have been priced in such a way where I don't need to. Now, if you started the season with Salah, which I did, and then I sold him. I've got 4.9 million in the bank right now. And I'd be very surprised if other people didn't have something in there, especially if you've maybe downgraded an Arsenal midfielder to a Maddison last week or whatever. So when you have so much to spare, I don't like. Point one is nothing. Point one is worth that information, isn't it? And Kane leaving as well. The game is priced in such a way that where price changes have not become irrelevant, but certainly they don't plague transfer plans in the way they used to, I don't think.
Yeah, it feels like the premiums are dying off slowly. Even Kevin De Bruyne is injured, and even when he is fit again, is he getting to a stage in his career now where he's not going to play every Premier League game? Probably. So it's the landscape is very, very different FPL wise with the prices. And even though the market's a little bit crazy, there's a lot of price falls and rises happening in the first 3 game weeks. But another example for me is I'm eyeing up Maddison this week, and one of the routes would be Rashford to Maddison, which would allow Gabriel to Trippier in Game Week 5. But I think already I'm probably at 0.0 for those 2 transfers, but I'm not going to rush it through. And if I can't get Trippier Game Week 5, I'm not going to lose any sleep. I'll just get him Game Week 6. I don't think it's a super fixture Game Week 5 against Brentford anyway. So I'm always of the... It was Tom Freeman a few years ago. I remember, I think it was the Meet the Manager series, and one of the lines always sticks with me. He said, "There's always a solution. If you miss out on a target, there's always a solution. There's always a plan B, or there's always another way to get to where you want to be." So I just don't bother about price like you. I don't look at price change websites unless there's very rarely it'll be a move I really want to make, 0.0, maybe Wednesday or Thursday. And rarely I'll go Wednesday or Thursday, but so far it's been Friday, and I think that's probably going to continue throughout the season.
Yeah, I think it pops up every now and then, but most of the time it's a brief sort of browse of those changes, and then I look at my team and go, okay, if that change does happen, that's fine. I can deal with that, no problem. I think Jay Eggersdorf a number of years ago, so we were talking about managers who've sort of given out little bits of advice that have stuck with me. He very much encouraged me to sort of think the point one is what you pay for the information. And information is worth that. You know, you pay for your players. You pay 12.5 million to have Salah. You pay 14 million to have Haaland, and probably 1 week in every 3, you end up paying 0.1 for the information, and the information is more important than the point one, so that you don't end up taking hits. Because going into game week 3, as you mentioned already, it was just quintessential. You went too early week if people made certain moves around certain players, because we had some injuries just surface later on in the week. Throw in 12 teams playing midweek football, and then as on top of the press conferences on Thursday, Friday. I agree completely, and then also the fact that most people are probably rolling in the Benjamins right now. I just think you've got to wait till Friday.
Last week was a really good example of paying that point one or point two for the information, because I had João Pedro, then Enciso got injured. And I thought to myself, right, I'm going to keep João Pedro now. Because initially I was going to sell him. But then the Enciso injury news came through and I thought, right, I'm going to keep him now. But then wait until Friday, and De Zerbi said Ferguson's going to start. So that flipped me the other way again. And I thought, right, I'm not going to take a chance here. I'll just get rid of him. And if I didn't wait until Friday, I probably wouldn't have got Nico Jackson. And there's a chance I probably wouldn't have got Gusto either, because I would have went a different route with the transfer. So waiting for the information really helped me last week. It forced me to sell Pedro, which forced me down the route of finding a way to get Jackson, which was Gusto. And obviously there's a lot of luck involved in that. But if I went Monday or Tuesday with a couple of Rage transfers last week, I think my team would look very different, and it probably wouldn't have Nico Jackson or Gusto.
Absolutely. I mean, again, it comes down to sometimes you just make your own luck, in the sense that you have done all the things right by the process, and some sort of, concept within that, be it sort of like fate or God or something, has rewarded you for ticking all the boxes on your process. And we see that in all sorts of things. You see it, football managers say about the way they prepared for, a particular game. You put in that extra mile, something, the ghost in the machine, whatever you want it to be, it ends up rewarding you. You see it in games, you see it in computer games, you see it in strategy games, you see it in FPL. It's everywhere. So, and it feels really affirming, doesn't it, that when things go right, because you feel like you prepared in the right way.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about the process. Again, I'm sitting here with a good game week. Even if Jackson and Gusto didn't do the business, I still think the process was good, because the fixtures for Jackson are really good, and investing in 2 more Chelsea players just seemed like a good idea. And game week 1, it's gone well for me. The first game week owning the 3 Chelsea guys, and hopefully that continues over the next few weeks with the fixtures.
Fingers crossed. Well, someone who's not having such a good time of it this season, as ever, is my dad, who we will bring along his little interlude now. You will enjoy this, Mark, because I know that you were sort of a bit like, I don't like how jammy he's getting. It hasn't gone very well from this week. I think he missed the deadline. No transfers made, and the way the team is lined up, I mean, it is just a total mess. So you should take some enjoyment from this. Ramsdale in goal, so 1 point there. 1 point for Ben White. 1 point for Dunk. And 2 points for Zuma, so 4 points across his back 4. Barnes, Matoma, 1 point each. 12 points for Bowen. He is still admittedly getting a lot of mileage out of Bowen, who at some point is going to come. He might even be in my game week 9 wildcard, to be honest, because West Ham's fixtures get good then. 8 points for Saka, but we've all got him. 1 point for Diaz, and then Captain Haaland up front. Alvarez 2 points. Onana, Stones, Callum Wilson still on the bench. Why? Why is he there? And Dan Burn 2 points. So. Yeah. Do you enjoy that a little bit more than the last couple of weeks, I'm going to guess, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't fun last week when he had a stormer and I had a shocker. I'm going to actually make a prediction this week. If your dad remembers to log in this Friday, I reckon he'll captain Bowen against Luton, because he's been doing well for him.
Ooh, I think he probably will. I mean, the Fulham game may tip him towards common sense with Man City, but it's a good point. I mean, he does like to, stick to his guns, or to his hammers, I should say. He's going to have Ward-Prowse at some point. He's always loved Ward-Prowse anyway, even as a West Ham fan, having seen Ward-Prowse punish West Ham countless times with Southampton. He's very excited to have him around. So, I mean, hopefully this is a nice little sort of reminder to people that just keep watching West Ham. Their fixtures are going to get very good, and maybe one day my dad will look like a genius. Right now, he's ranked at 6.3 million in the world. So don't follow him for advice outside of the hammers, I would say.
talking about big ranks, he's doing badly, but he's doing better than Sonny. Sonny's
Ah, yes.
been a bad start to the season. 7.7 million overall rank, and it's three losses against his dad so far. So we'll touch on his team again when he finally beats me. I treated him to a new player last week.
Ooh.
He We know the rules. Player needs to have son in their first name or their second name. But I felt like his team was really struggling. So he was born in March. So off the back of Solly March having a good start to the season, I've brought him in, and of course he blanked as soon as I brought him in. But just I made a little exception to the rule to bring in Solly March. So hopefully that improves his fortunes and gives him a better chance of beating me over the next couple of weeks.
Well, I mean, so I like the fact that you've sort of tweaked the rules a little bit. Rules are made to be broken as far as I'm concerned. But also, you might not be far off because if you think, I mean, obviously the March thing is perfect, but Solly is short for, I think, Solomon. And some people might shorten that to Sonny in the sense that you just take out the middle part of the name, Solomon, just S-O-N. So you're not far off. You're not far off with the sort of anagram and a sort of extraction of some letters if he's kind of a Sonny as well, let's be honest.
Yeah, he's in now. I can't remember who I sold him for, but it might have been Richarlison, who's been an absolute disaster. So Sonny's been waking up at 4 a.m. screaming, "Just get Richarlison out of my team." So we had to address that.
Oh, I see. Did you not wonder why there was a Tottenham Hotspur striker in your house at that time?
Yeah, it was strange.
Well, actually, it's a great segue, actually, to be honest, into our second order, because I was looking for a Premier League manager making a substitution, removing someone from the pitch who's not a bad player. And interestingly enough, I found a great picture of Postecoglou bringing off Son. Heung-min Son, who is on the screen right now, which brings us to our second order about making changes when sometimes that maybe involves someone we still think is good.
Yeah, I think rule number 2 for this week, and I think it's something we all need to get comfortable with, is selling a good player for another good player. Or you could rephrase it, you're selling a good FPL pick for another good FPL pick. Postecoglou is obviously happy to substitute a very good player, Heung-min Son, from time to time. I think, especially in FPL at the moment with the midfielders, I look at mine, Martinelli, Saka, Bruno, Rashford. There's about 5 or 6 others that I would love to have. Foden, Sterling, Mbeumo. You've got the Abbey, the Brighton guys, Ward-Prowse, Bowen. There's loads and loads of options. So there's going to be a lot of points in this season where we simply need to sell a good pick for another good pick. And we know that can backfire. You've got to just kind of back your gut instinct, play the fixtures mainly. I know a lot of people did that by selling Watkins to Jackson last week, and they ended up, they scored only 2 points in the difference. But yeah, there's going to be the way the players are priced, the way that so many midfielders in particular are performing well. We've got to get comfortable selling good picks for other good picks, and I'm probably going to do it this week. I could deal with the Gabriel issue, but I don't think I need to because I've got 3 defenders I can play this week. So I'm looking at selling a midfielder to get a Maddison or a Foden. I can't get Sterling because I'm tripled up. I'd be strongly considering him if I wasn't already tripled up. But yeah, so Martinelli or Rashford, for example, to Maddison. In previous seasons, I'd be wary of doing it because slightly sideways, good picks, good teams. But again, fixtures, for example, for City and Tottenham are much better short term than they are for a Martinelli, for example, or even a Rashford. So we've just got to get comfortable, and it will backfire maybe as much as it doesn't. It could be a 50-50 strike rate, but you just got to get comfortable. If I sell Martinelli this week, if I bring in Maddison, if Maddison blanks, if Martinelli gets a 15-pointer, the thought process was fine. And you've got to just, get used to that this season, I think.
Yeah, playing the fixtures is obviously a really solid way of doing things. And I think sometimes the best way to keep using the fixtures as a means of a success or failure, right? Because maybe in that first one, that's where it feels like a defeat because he outscored him. But then actually, it's sometimes worth reviewing that period. Let's say you think the game week 4 to 10 for Spurs is better than it is for Arsenal. Wait till game week 10. Compare Maddison versus Martinelli at that point. It will tell you the answer. And I can think of lots of times in the past where I've made that change and have been disappointed in the short term. and then have double checked actually in the long term it was probably the right decision anyway, because you just can't beat a good run of fixtures. You just can't beat that. Very few players end up being fixture proof, really. Do I think Martinelli can be that this season? Not really. I'm sure now I've said that he probably will be, but for the most part it's in the long term those decisions usually pay off if you've used some form of season ticket that's going to inform those choices.
Yeah, if you my case this week, I'm looking at the Scout fixture ticker, Tottenham versus Arsenal in terms of fixtures. I'm looking at underlying numbers, Maddison versus Martinelli, and everything is pointing towards make the transfer because Martinelli's not doing enough for me. Maddison's a little bit cheaper as well, which always helps. And I was very close to getting Maddison game week 1, and slightly regret that. And I just want to fix it before I wait any longer. I was kind of relieved in a way that maybe about 300,000 people sold them last week and missed out on the points. That's just me being a selfish FPL manager in mini leagues and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't want to. I watched the Tottenham game, and I think I've watched 2 Tottenham games so far this season, and he just runs the show. He's just so good, and it's nothing new. He's been a proven FPL pick for a long time. He was fantastic at Leicester. He's just a talisman, and I expect him to have a really good season. And he's my kind of pick. He's the kind of player that I buy in game week 4. And he could still be there in game week 38. So that's the hope.
Yeah, he definitely looks like he can be a season holder. And he, of course, has even taken Harry Kane's number 10 shirt as well. So talismanic already, really, to be honest, which is nice to see. But you've mentioned fixtures, and I might sort of catch you mildly off guard here because we haven't necessarily specifically planned to talk about this. But this order very much feels like something that is actually quite relevant if someone's wildcarding, in the sense that the best case scenario for a wildcard usually is not necessarily to use it when your team is in dire straits. I mean, my dad's team knows all about that, but largely we try and avoid ending up like that, right? We want to try and use that wildcard to springboard from one successful team to another successful team that just looks different, largely based around the fixtures, probably involves selling some good players and buying some other good players. And so, sort of boiling all that down, I mean, the wildcard has come into conversation this week, so I thought I'd perhaps maybe just get your thoughts on maybe when you're thinking about it for your team, when you think is the best time for other people to play it.
Yeah, it's crossed my mind already a couple of times this season, in particular after the bad game week 2. The wildcard thoughts were there, they calmed down. But even after a good game week 3, I'm keeping a very open mind on the wildcard. I'm open to doing it during the first international break for game week 5. And it'll just really depend on how game week 4 goes for certain picks. Certain picks in my team. My bench is a mess. I've got Gabriel, Nakamba, and Bayer. Bayer's injured. Gabriel doesn't play. Marvelous is not worth much. Johnston's my goalkeeper. That could become a problem soon. And then when I look at the fixture swings, Chelsea have great fixtures. If Sterling does really well again in game week 4, I can't get to him. So that's another factor that might push me towards a wild card. Newcastle's fixtures are turning. Manchester City have great fixtures, and I've only got Haaland. So, Foden, Alvarez, Diaz, Gvardiol, maybe even Ederson, dare I say it. So I'm keeping a very open mind, and I'm not against a game week 5 wildcard if I feel it's right for my squad. So there's a lot of things I'm keeping an eye on in game week 4, which might push me towards playing it early. So yeah, open mind. If I don't play at game week 5, it could be the next international break. It could be game week 18, game week 19. It could be late. So yeah, just totally flexible with that chip.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, I'm looking this season at as you say, game week 18-19 is around the time that the Club World Cup comes in to complicate things for the Premier League. We lose at least City and Brentford, and I think game week 18, and there has been rumblings that the Palace City game in game week 17, I think it is, or maybe it's 18-19. The specific numbers I can't remember off the top of my head, but at the moment, Palace versus City is going ahead, but if City's travel plans sort of extend a few days hence of where they currently are, could maybe topple the Palace game as well. And so, bearing in mind, City are a team we like to be invested in, it's not a bad time to play it, but I suppose it's can you hold off that long? I mean, I suppose you've already mentioned you want to try and be as flexible as possible, but I guess have you ever managed to hold on to the wild card for that later time in the season?
Yeah, in the last 3 or 4 seasons, I've done it at least twice, keeping it until the very last game week, whether it be game week 19, game week 20. I know it's slightly different every season, especially during the COVID seasons. It was, different timings and stuff. But there has been a few occasions where I never felt during the first half of the season that the wild card was needed. And even when I did play it in, very late, game week 18, game week 19, there was one occasion where I made maybe 4 changes on the wild card. So I always feel like wild cards can be a bit of a curse. Your team's usually not in a terrible position because you put a lot of thought into the picks, and a lot of the picks you make are long-term picks. So wildcards very often, especially the first game week after you play it, can really backfire. The players you sell do well. Your new picks don't hit the ground running. So in many ways, I'm kind of reluctant to play it at all. And I've always had this little dream that some season I won't use one of my wildcards, which sounds a bit crazy, but if you manage your team well and you fix your weakest link often, and if your squad's doing well, sometimes there's no need to do it. Or when you do it, you literally change around the fringes. You change your bench players or just make some slight tweak. So I must have been burned a few times by wildcards because I get a shiver when I think about them. I'm quite fearful of them because I don't like change. So we'll see how that plays out this season.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean, actually. I mean, I think the best wildcards are the ones where what you do change feels peripheral, because sometimes the devil is in the detail. It's being able to, well, just to use an example, I guess I've had success with in the last couple of weeks, is being able to bring in an Aston Villa defender to cover the fact that Gabriel hasn't been starting games, whereas some people were having to make transfers for that. Being able to... It's those situations that give you the extra 6 to 10 points in a game week that ends up making the difference. And the wild card is the best, most shameless time to do it, because a lot of the time people have bigger fires to put out, as the expression goes. So, that's certainly beneficial. I think for me, I want to try and hold on for as long as I can, because what we discovered, we did a little bit of research into this in Scout when I was here before in the editorial team, and I've seen anecdotal success stories about this as well, is that if you do wild card late, it puts you in a better position to score the most points in what is the hardest stage of the season to maintain decent sort of performance in, which is that January to March time. Because if you've wildcarded really, really early, and you want to make, so game week 4 to 8, something like that, and you want to hold off that second wildcard so that you are playing it in time for chip season, which is usually around game week 28 to 32. It sort of fluctuates in many ways. That's a massive gap. You've got like a huge gap between game week 4 and say game week 28, like maybe 26 to 30 game weeks long, where you just don't wildcard. And so then you end up taking lots of hits in January, February around some double game weeks that happen and blank game weeks that happen because of the EFL Cup and stuff like that. If you use your wildcard right at the end of that first period, you are effectively setting your team up to be optimized for that run of games where most people are sort of scrabbling around to just put a team together because of all those different considerations. You then shorten the gap between your first wildcard, and then you can play that second wildcard as late as you like, fully lean into chip season without kind of ruining your team in the middle part. Obviously, it's dependent on being able to start the season well. You need to keep your team ticking along in such a way that doesn't need a wildcard till game week 18, 19. And in terms of the so we just discovered that was happening with a lot of teams. The teams that were deploying their wildcards later on tended to finish higher. And then the anecdotal thing was Ali, who obviously won FPL last year. He waited very, very late for his first wildcard. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you when he played it, the specific game week, but he waited quite a long time, and so that he could optimize his team for the second half of the season in a much better way. So if we can aim for that, great. But of course, it is team dependent from week to week. So,
Yeah. Before we move away from the wildcard discussion, I actually had a really good chat with someone today who were thinking about playing the wildcard this week. Had a look at the team. We had bounced a couple of ideas, and his words were basically like, I feel like I'm already a couple of steps behind. I want to get back on the front foot. I hate my team. So the team had players like, Pickford, Gabriel was still there, Joe Pedro was still there, and there was quite a few, big omissions. Maybe no Jackson up front and stuff like that. And I always feel like, yes, it does make sense maybe to hold it a little bit longer, or maybe even quite late towards game week 18, game week 19. But if you're gonna look at your FPL team every Friday night and think, I'm not feeling good about this game week, this is gonna be another red arrow, just simply don't overthink it. If it's going to make you happier, if you wildcard in game week 4 and it's going to make you happier for the weekend, FPL should be enjoyed. And if you feel like if you're going to be miserable for the next 4 game weeks with the current players that you have, just ship them out and just get a new team, and you'll still be able to navigate the other parts of the season without it. So FPL for me, if you're not enjoying it, and if a wildcard will make you enjoy it more, if you've got a lot of issues like the ones I just mentioned, there's certainly a few teams that I've seen this week. And he sent me a wildcard draft, and Sterling, Foden, Mbumo, Jackson, a new goalkeeper. I was like, yeah, do you know what? That looks really good for your squad. I don't feel like I need the wild card, but I think it might be a good idea for your team. So he still hasn't made a decision, but there will be teams out there. If it feels right for you, that's the main thing. Don't blindly take advice from people to say you should keep it for longer, because if your team needs it, especially if you've had a tough start and you feel like you're going to have more, pain over the next few weeks, just course correct. That's what wild cards are for.
Absolutely. And to be honest, I think the disparity in what is the right thing to do for each team, just you saying about wildcards feel like a curse, it perfectly sums it up. It's a curse for people who've got to decide when to use them. It's kind of almost a curse as well for us content creators. Whenever it becomes wildcard time, I'm like, oh no, look, we're going to have to make some content around whether or not it's worth wildcarding. And I don't want to do it myself. I like my team. There's going to be some people that think it's an overreaction. It's just the wildcard discussion, there's just so much disparity. And as you say, the bottom line, as you say, absolutely is it's team specific. So do try and base it off that rather than necessarily some broader strategy. So yeah, thankfully enough, the third order is actually very simple in comparison, and it involves someone we've talked about a lot already. Spurs new number 10.
Yeah, I'm going to try and at least mention one player each week now when it comes to the orders. It'll come as no surprise to people that order number 3 is by James Maddison. If you don't have him, I just think he's tailor-made to have a huge season FPL wise, playing in this role for Tottenham. Very front foot team, talisman. Hopefully he gets penalties, although that's still up in the air, obviously. But even without them, set pieces, free kicks, creating chances, getting in the box, scoring goals. And this goes for people as well who sold him last week. If you sold him last week, don't be hard on yourself. You had, in my eyes, enough information there to think he wasn't going to play if you did it on Tuesday or Wednesday. Don't be stubborn about it. Don't be bitter about it. If you think he's right up there as one of the best picks in the game, which I do, go back and get him and just enjoy having him again, because he's a joy to watch. He's a joy to own. Plays FPL himself, which is always a bonus when we're looking at our players. So yeah, I feel like this is basically the James Maddison episode of General's Orders, and I think I'm going to have to go ahead and buy him this week now. So hopefully it's a good performance. 2 good fixtures coming up. Yeah. And again, caveat here, I can't get Sterling. I've got 3 Chelsea. If I didn't have 3 Chelsea, it would be a different conversation. It would be very much, do I get Maddison or do I get Sterling? And I'm maybe overlooking Foden a wee bit here as well on recency bias, but I'm much more, Maddison's minutes are a lot more secure, although Foden's minutes should be pretty good for the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I'm very high on Maddison, and if you can get to him easily this week, I would go there.
I like that you've actually made specific reference to people who did sell him, because there was a lot of them. And that course correction of bringing in a player who you very recently got rid of. I can think of some of my most enjoyable times playing FPL actually involved situations where I did that. The one that stuck with me most involves the man whose shirt has been up behind me for a very long time, which is Raul Jimenez, back when he was first in the Premier League. He came in as, I think, a 5.5 million forward. And I think I got him for game week 3 of his first season, because he'd done quite well in the first 2. Didn't really get that much out of him in game weeks 3, 4, 5, so I sold him, and then all of a sudden that's when he exploded. That's when he became huge, and I think I went maybe 2 weeks without him, ruining the fact I'd sold him, and I managed to get him back in just in time to make sure I was still on that bandwagon, and had some success there. I did some flip-flops with Bruno at the beginning of 2023 as well, that worked out quite nicely. Basically, one of my friends who I've been playing FPL with for a long time, hopefully he's watching this, has always said your biggest enemy in FPL is yourself. And in that situation, the enemy being yourself is the fact that I can't bring that guy in, I already sold him. But it's happened to me so many times where I've then brought that player back and it's massively rewarded my team. So it's a good point to mention those people, because there are a lot of people that did sell him. Don't let that stop you.
Yeah, you've sent me off into a daydream. You brought back such great memories there. The notification, goal, Jimenez, assist, Doherty. They were such good times with when Nuno was at Wolves. That first season, it was so good.
Yeah, that was a beautiful time. It's they're actually still both in the Premier League, actually, Jimenez and Doherty, but probably unlikely to deliver in quite the same way, unfortunately. And actually, one final question on Maddison versus Sterling, because that is a question a lot of people have this week. My sort of view right now is that Maddison does get a bit of an edge over Sterling based around what isn't available at Spurs, in the sense that you don't necessarily want to cover, in inverted commas, certain assets. But if you look at the fact that Jackson, statistically so far, is outperforming Sterling, there is a forward at Chelsea who's in the same level of form as Sterling, just about, right? But Maddison, you can't find a forward at Spurs where you're going to get anywhere near the same, because as far as I can tell, all of their actual centre forwards on the actual football pitch are midfielders in FPL. I think it's just Dane Scarlett who's left as an FPL forward at Spurs. So it just means that in terms of finding room for these people, you can more easily find room in your team for Maddison and Jackson than you can Sterling and, say, Dane Scarlett. And I sort of wonder if that's come into your thinking at all, with sort of like the spaces that are available in teams right now.
Yeah, I'm really trying to put myself in that, the mindset of somebody who can get Sterling or Maddison, and it just comes down to the kind of manager I am. I like to make as few transfers as possible. I kind of aim for 40 transfers over the course of the season. And when it comes to a decision this week, like Sterling versus Maddison, I always, when I buy an FPL player, I never think, right, I'm going to buy him for 5 weeks and then jump off. I always like the idea of a player coming in and being a season keeper. And that's why I like Bruno. I think Bruno has a very good chance of being a season keeper. I think Saka has a very good chance of being the same. Estupiñán also, even with the fixtures, I'm probably just going to hold them throughout and just bank on those attacking returns. And then when it comes to Maddison versus Sterling, to me, number one, I don't want to put too much weight on the Luton game because it was Luton. And maybe I do want to see a little bit more from Sterling before I think, right, fantastic. There's no doubt he's a great pick for this coming game week. But for me, Maddison is, when I weigh it up in my head, which player, Maddison or Sterling, which player is more likely to come in and be in my team until game week 38? And that's Maddison at the moment. Now, that could change. If Sterling keeps doing it, he could become a no-brainer. The good thing about both teams as well, there's no Europe to worry about, so rotation shouldn't be too bad. But yeah, I'm much, in my mind, Sterling's more explosive, or potentially more explosive. But if I'm going to bet on one of them to be, tick along consistently long term, 10 to 15 game weeks, I'm gonna go with Maddison on that one. So and the answer to the question might be just get both players, get Maddison this week, and then I get Sterling game week 5 if he does well again in game week 4.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, it's all team dependent in many ways, as we've said already. There are going to be certain jumping on points for some of these players. Maddison feels a little bit sooner, in my opinion as well. So yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it, to be honest. Well, thank you very much, as ever, Mark, for taking us through the orders. They're always very good to keep us grounded and making sure that we're approaching the season in the right way. We should just remind people again, of course, to sign up for Fantasy Football Scout membership ahead of game week 4, and you'll be able to see all of the reasons why we like the likes of Maddison and some of those other players that we're talking about. Or perhaps you've seen a player talked about quite a lot in the FPL discourse and you think, maybe they're a little bit overrated. Maybe I'll just have a quick peek at some of their numbers, and that can be sometimes how you can test some of these theories about who we should be signing, for example. So make sure you sort that out before game week 4. Don't also forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the Fantasy Football Scout YouTube channel as well, and hit that bell notification. We've got loads of content coming up over the next couple of days. Well, with that, we can leave you fine, folks, to the rest of your tinkering, and we will see you next time, won't we, Mark?
See you later, folks, and best of luck for game week 4.